The Valorian royal palace shone like a crystal under the twin suns, its golden towers reaching into the lavender sky. Inside, servants moved silently along the marble corridors, careful not to disturb the young princess who had long been the subject of whispered disappointment. Princess Leora, the youngest of the Valorian royal family, had grown up knowing her father, and court saw her as a failure. Unlike her older sisters, who were praised for their potential to bear heirs and strengthen alliances, Leora had been declared infertile by the best medical experts in the kingdom. The word hung over her like a shadow, a constant reminder that she was seen as useless. She walked slowly through the palace gardens, her delicate feet brushing against the soft petals of Valoria's exotic flowers. Even in her luxurious gown, she moved as if weighed down by invisible chains. Leora's green eyes, bright and curious despite her years of neglect, scanned the horizon. Birds with silver feathers flitted among the trees, singing songs she barely noticed. She had spent most of her life in quiet observation, never daring to speak out, because speaking often brought criticism or cold indifference. That day, however, was different. The palace was alive with the chatter of foreign guests, humans who had come from a distant planet. They were here to strengthen ties with Valoria, to show respect to the royal family, and most importantly, to negotiate trade agreements. The humans were unlike the aliens Leora had grown up around. They were loud, expressive, and full of emotions that seemed strange to her people. She had always been fascinated by them from a distance, secretly watching as they laughed, stumbled, and fumbled through the rituals that Valorians considered sacred. Her father, King Valen, called her to the ceremonial hall. Leora's heart sank. She had learned early in life that being summoned often meant she was a tool for the court's plans, rather than being asked out of care. Today, the court whispered, she was to be offered as a symbolic gift to a human diplomat. The king had grown impatient with her presence. He assumed the humans would not care about her infertility. To him, she was expendable, a mere decoration to prove the goodwill of Valoria. Ethan Cole, the human officer chosen to receive her, waited in the grand hall, looking around with a mixture of awe and curiosity. Unlike the Valorian court, he did not move with stiffness or caution. His dark hair fell slightly into his eyes, but he brushed it away casually, and he smiled when he saw Leora enter. To him, she was not a political object or a failure. She was simply a person. When Leora arrived, the court bowed and presented her formally, speaking in a tone that suggested she had no rights, no voice, and no purpose beyond this ceremony. Ethan stepped forward and, to the shock of everyone present, extended his hand to Leora, his smile gentle and sincere. "It's an honor to meet you, Princess Leora," he said. His voice carried warmth, something the court had not expected a human to offer. Leora hesitated. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Even her sisters, who were trained in diplomacy and etiquette, had always looked at her with subtle disdain. But here was a human treating her as though she mattered. Her hand shook slightly as she took his, and for the first time in her life, she felt a small spark of hope. The next days were filled with surprises. Ethan did not treat her as a possession. He allowed her to explore, asking questions about Valoria, listening intently to her answers and even laughing at her timid jokes. They walked through the crystal gardens, watched the shimmering rivers of light that flowed like liquid diamonds through the city, and shared meals where Leora felt for the first time that she had a choice in what she ate and how she moved. She discovered that humans valued kindness and equality in ways Valorians rarely did. Ethan spoke of his home planet, where people worked together and celebrated differences rather than condemning them. Leora found herself opening up, telling him things she had never dared say aloud. The loneliness she had felt, the constant pressure to be perfect, and the ache of feeling unwanted. Ethan listened without judgment. He even defended her when other diplomats made subtle jokes about her infertility, saying it was irrelevant to her worth. For the first time, Leora felt respected and valued. Her laughter, once rare and hidden, began to emerge more freely. Then came a strange change. Leora began experiencing sensations she could not understand. Her body, which had been pronounced incapable of reproduction, responded to Ethan's presence in ways no scanner or medical test could predict. She felt warmth and a sense of connection, a bond that went beyond friendship or politeness. She tried to ignore it, fearing disappointment or scandal, but it was impossible. Her feelings for Ethan were growing, and with them, Her body began to respond in ways that shocked even her. One morning, she fainted while walking in the gardens. Ethan, who had stayed nearby, caught her and carried her to a secluded chamber. Using human medical technology, he discovered something extraordinary. Leora was pregnant. A child was growing inside her, a child that was both human and Valorian. The possibility had been considered impossible, yet here it was, proof that Leora was not infertile, only misunderstood. The news spread quickly through the palace. Servants whispered in corridors. Advisors speculated in hushed tones, and the king's chambers were filled with tension. King Valen, already displeased with Leora's existence, was furious beyond reason. He had counted on her being a political ornament, never capable of producing an heir, and now the first royal child would be half human, breaking centuries of tradition. Ethan refused to be intimidated. He stood by Leora, defending her against the court's gossip and the king's anger. He treated her with unwavering respect and care, showing everyone that the princess was more than her fertility status. Leora, in turn, began to see herself in a new light. She was not a failure. She was a person capable of love, courage, and choice. The palace, which had always felt like a cage, began to change. Some members of the court, inspired by Ethan's bravery, quietly supported Leora. They admired her for stepping forward, for embracing life in defiance of the king's outdated rules. Leora realized that strength did not come from royal decree or medical perfection. It came from resilience, compassion, and the courage to claim her own destiny. Night after night, Ethan and Leora spoke quietly, sharing stories of their lives, dreams, and fears. He taught her about humans, about their values, and about the possibilities that existed when people acted from love rather than duty. Leora, who had spent her life feeling small and powerless, began to grow, not just as a princess but as a person with a voice, a choice, and a future. When the day came for the court to formally announce the pregnancy, the tension was almost unbearable. The king's advisors whispered urgently, debating how to respond. The king himself stood rigid, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. But Leora, standing beside Ethan, felt a sense of calm she had never known. She met the king's gaze without fear and said clearly, "This child is mine, and I choose who will protect and guide it." The hall fell silent. Even the king, who had ruled Valoria with an iron fist, found himself unsure how to respond. The princess he had labeled infertile now stood before him with confidence, carrying the first hybrid heir in Valorian history. The court, which had long considered her weak and useless, now watched in awe and unease. Ethan, holding her hand, whispered, "We will face this together. Whatever comes, we choose each other." Leora squeezed his hand, feeling the strength of their bond. She realized that life was no longer about being a pawn in her father's schemes. It was about making choices, standing up for what mattered, and embracing the possibilities that love and courage could create. As the sun set over the palace, casting long golden shadows through the crystal towers, Leora felt a sense of hope she had never known. For the first time, she was not just a princess defined by her failures. She was a mother, a partner, and a person with the power to change her destiny. And somewhere deep in the palace, the king's anger simmered, foreshadowing the challenges yet to come. The court would not easily accept this unprecedented union, and the question of the heir's place in Valorian society would test every bond, belief, and law the kingdom had ever known. But for now, Leora and Ethan had one another, and that was enough to begin a new chapter, one where love, courage, and choice mattered more than status or expectation. The palace had never felt so tense. Whispers filled every corridor, and even the guards seemed uncertain where their loyalties should lie. King Valen paced in his grand chamber, his golden robes rustling with each step. His youngest daughter, once dismissed as worthless, now carried a child that could change the fate of Valoria forever. The very idea that the first royal heir could be half human was unbearable. His eyes, sharp and demanding, scanned the palace records, seeking precedent. There was none. Outside, Leora remained calm, standing beside Ethan in the quiet of their chamber. She had grown stronger in the weeks since the news of her pregnancy. Her body had adjusted to the impossible changes, and her mind had strengthened through the bond she shared with Ethan. She had chosen her path, and nothing the king did could sway her resolve. The morning brought a formal summons from the king. Leora and Ethan entered the grand hall, where the court had gathered. Faces were filled with curiosity, skepticism, and fear. The king's voice boomed through the hall, demanding that Leora hand over her child. He declared that no hybrid could inherit the throne and that Ethan was an unsuitable guardian. Leora stepped forward, her green eyes steady and unwavering. "This child is mine," she said, her voice firm. "I choose who will protect and guide it. It will not be taken from me." Her words rippled through the court, leaving many shocked. Even the king, used to unquestioned obedience, faltered for a moment. Ethan stood beside her, unwavering. "We will not surrender the child," he said. "We will face whatever comes, but we choose each other. And we choose the future of this child." His calm courage inspired whispers of support from some members of the court who had long questioned the king's rigid rules. The king's anger flared. "Do you defy me?" he shouted. "Do you mock the laws of Valoria and the sacred lineage of the throne?" His words were sharp, filled with centuries of tradition and authority. Leora took a step closer to Ethan, her voice growing stronger. "I do not defy tradition. I do not mock it. I honor life and I honor choice. This child will have a future filled with love, not fear. That is what matters." The court fell silent. Some of the royal advisors shifted nervously, unsure whether to side with the king or the young princess. In the past, no one had dared oppose him, but now the impossible had happened. Leora had defied expectations, and the people were beginning to notice. The king, realizing words alone would not sway them, summoned his guards. They moved forward, intending to retrieve Leora and the unborn heir by force. Ethan placed himself in front of her, raising his hands. "You will not harm her," he said firmly, "or you will face the consequences." For a moment there was a tense standoff. Guards hesitated, sensing the courage in Ethan's voice and the calm determination in Leora's eyes. Whispers among the onlookers grew louder. Some began to question the king's judgment, and a few even stepped back from the guards, unwilling to act against the princess. Leora's body began to react in ways even she could not fully understand. A soft light emanated from her, a gentle pulse that seemed to fill the room with warmth and calm. Valorians knew of royal powers, abilities that were rare and often dormant, waiting for the right moment to manifest. Leora, once thought infertile and weak, now displayed an aura of authority and strength that no one could ignore. The king's face twisted in disbelief. "Impossible," he muttered. His own advisors stepped closer, whispering urgently, acknowledging the power the princess now held. Leora's presence commanded attention, not because of her status, but because of the undeniable force of her choice, her courage, and her connection to life itself. Seeing the hesitation in the guards, Leora spoke again. "This child will not be a pawn of the crown. It will be loved, protected, and guided by those who care. If you wish to see the future of Valoria, you must accept that change is inevitable." Some in the court, inspired by her words and the unusual light that surrounded her, began to kneel, not to the king, but in respect for the princess and the unborn child. Murmurs of approval spread, and the atmosphere shifted. The king's authority, so absolute for centuries, now faced a challenge unlike any before. Ethan took Leora's hand. "We will leave if necessary," he said quietly, "but we will not abandon this child. We choose life over fear, love over control." Leora nodded, feeling the bond between them grow stronger. Together, they were more than individuals. They were a force that could challenge centuries of rigid tradition. The king, sensing the shift in the court, tried to regain control. "You dare to undermine me?" he demanded, his voice echoing through the hall. "This child will not inherit the throne if it is half human. I will see to it myself." Leora stepped forward, her aura of calm strength now fully visible. "The child will inherit a world shaped by love and courage, not by fear and prejudice," she said firmly. "I am not afraid of change. I am not afraid of life." A powerful moment of silence followed. The king's face, usually stern and unyielding, showed cracks of uncertainty. His advisors, who had spent generations enforcing strict traditions, looked around, unsure of what to do next. They had never witnessed such courage or defiance. Finally, the king spoke, his voice quieter but still sharp. "If you leave with him, you will be banished from the palace. The child will have no place in Valoria unless you obey my will." Ethan shook his head. "We will not obey an unjust decree," he said. "We will protect the child, and we will protect each other." Leora's hands glowed softly, a signal of her latent abilities responding to the strength of her will. She could feel the child within her responding too, as if aware of the tension and danger around them. It was as though the unborn heir already understood that its life would be guided by courage, not by fear of a crown. The king's anger turned to frustration. "Do you think you can challenge centuries of tradition with mere words and feelings?" he asked. "You cannot control love or life," Leora replied, her voice unwavering. "You cannot choose what matters most for me or my child. We will live and we will decide our own destiny." The court, inspired by her courage, began to voice their support. "The princess is right," one advisor said cautiously. "Perhaps the time for change has come." Another echoed. "The child is a symbol of hope, not failure." Even some of the king's guards, who had been loyal for decades, lowered their weapons, seeing the determination and unity between Leora and Ethan. The standoff ended not with violence, but with a quiet acknowledgement that a new era was beginning. With the king momentarily silenced, Leora and Ethan left the hall holding hands. They walked through the gardens under the twin suns, feeling the warmth and light embrace them. Leora's aura of strength continued to glow softly, a signal to the world that the infertile princess was now a force to be reckoned with. In the days that followed, the palace and the kingdom began to adjust to the unprecedented situation. Some members of the court tried to resist, but the bond between Leora, Ethan, and the unborn heir proved unshakable. People began to see that love, choice, and courage were stronger than tradition and fear. Leora and Ethan made preparations for the child's arrival, teaching each other about human and Valorian customs. They created a home filled with warmth, knowledge, and hope, a sanctuary where the child would be loved and nurtured without fear. King Valen, still simmering with anger, watched from his chambers, realizing that he could not control what had already begun. The princess he had dismissed as weak had grown into a symbol of strength, a bridge between worlds and a challenge to the old ways. The hybrid child would inherit not just life, but a legacy of courage, choice, and the power of love. At night, as the twin moons rose over Valoria, Leora rested beside Ethan. She felt the child move within her, a gentle rhythm of life that reminded her of the strength she had found. She whispered softly, "We will face whatever comes." Together, Ethan held her close, feeling the same resolve and love. The kingdom outside continued to buzz with uncertainty, but inside their sanctuary, Leora and Ethan knew the truth. The future belonged to those who dared to choose love, courage, and life. And as the stars glittered above Valoria, the unborn heir slept peacefully within Leora, a symbol of a new era that neither the king nor tradition could ever undo. For the first time in her life, Leora smiled without fear. She was no longer a princess defined by failure. She was a mother, a partner, and a living proof that courage and love could change the fate of worlds. And with Ethan by her side, she was ready to face anything the universe could bring.